Tennis Australia is facing a major dilemma over how to mark the 50th anniversary of Margaret Court's Grand Slam year, as the controversial star calls for more recognition of her achievements. Today, Melbourne reporter Christina Hearn joins us now. Chris, what precisely is Margaret Court wanting?
Georgie, Margaret Court wants to be treated in exactly the same manner as Rod Laver before his milestone year. The difference, of course, being Margaret Court is a very polarising figure given her very vocal opposition to same-sex marriage. She has told The Age they brought in Tennis Australia, brought Rod in from America. If they think I'm going to just turn up, I don't think that's right. I think I should be invited. I would hope they would pay my way to come like they paid for his and honour me. If they're not going to do that, I don't really want to come. Margaret Court says her views on same-sex marriage really shouldn't come into it. It should all be about her on-court achievements. The real dilemma for Tennis Australia, though, is if Margaret Court does come to the Australian Open, it really could spark protests from gay rights advocates and certainly will reignite the debate over whether Margaret Court's name should be stripped from one of the main arenas here at Melbourne Park. Tennis Australia says it's currently working through the process of how to recognise Margaret Court's milestone.
2020 will mark 50 years since Margaret Court was awarded her Grand Slam title, and it's a milestone she wants to be celebrated for.
I won more Grand Slams than any man or woman, and I've won 64, and I think I should be just treated, well, that's all.
But the 77-year-old's views on same-sex marriage have stirred up controversy. The sporting legend faced severe backlash from other players. Some threatened to boycott the 2017 Australian Open. Others called for Margaret Court Arena to be renamed.
I treat everybody equally, but I said what the Bible said, and being a Christian, I got into trouble for that. I feel they shouldn't bring all that into my tennis. Because I do the same thing over again. I represent my nation in tennis.
Tennis Australia would not comment on plans for Margaret Court's Grand Slam anniversary, but a spokesperson has told Sky News the governing body's position on Miss Court's views have not changed since 2017. At that time, Tennis Australia released a statement saying, "We respect Margaret Court's achievements and unmatched playing record. Her views are her own and do not align with Tennis Australia's values of equality, inclusion and diversity."
There's been things that have been said and happened since, but I think, I still love my nation, I still represent my nation, and so I think I should be honoured.
Emily Evans, Sky News.
I want to discuss the way the alphabet bullies and their media cheerleaders target dissenting voices. This week, it's tennis legend Margaret Court, who will not have the 50-year anniversary of her Grand Slam year celebrated in the manner that Rod Laver's was, because she dared voice her opposition to same-sex marriage. Now, on a personal level, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone whose belief system, including attitude to gay marriage, is more at odds with mine than Margaret Court's. After all, she's a devout woman with traditional, religiously mandated views, while I'm an atheist, single mum who couldn't give a stuff who marries who. But though I disagree with her, I will vehemently defend her right to speak her mind without being punished. Indeed, it takes great courage to speak your mind in 2019, particularly if you are challenging the trans agenda or other issues where groupthink has taken hold. Look around and you'll see plenty of examples of blind adherence to notions considered nonsensical a few years ago, from gender being fluid to diversity trumping meritocracy. But there are a few brave souls willing to challenge the dominant orthodoxy. Musician Kanye West, comedian Dave Chappelle, and feminist scholar Germaine Greer are among the few who refuse to conform to the progressive groupthink demanded by the media, academia and celebrity class. Closer to home, marine physicist Professor Peter Ridd, businessman Jerry Harvey, basketballer Andrew Bogut and comedian Barry Humphries are also fearless in telling it like it is. In the age of online mobs and cancel culture, individuals can pay a heavy price for stating uncomfortable truths or opinions, even when those opinions are mainstream. We've seen Jermaine Greer being blacklisted from speaking engagements and writers' festivals, and Kanye West has been maligned as crazy, stupid and a race traitor. Among the most influential and often vicious groups targeting dissenters are trans activists, backed by powerful media voices, who have had great success in intimidating and silencing those who question their agenda. Barry Humphries is a good example. He was stripped of the honour of having the Melbourne Comedy Festival's biggest award bear his name. Tennis great Martina Navratilova was dropped by an LGBT charity for saying transgender athletes have an unfair advantage. She then launched a very humiliating apology after that entire episode. And actor Mario Lopez a few months ago was monstered for saying 3-year-olds are too young to identify as a different gender. When I wrote about the unfairness of trans athletes competing against women, I received dozens of supportive messages from current and former elite athletes, but only one was willing to be named publicly. The rest were too scared. Speaking out comes at a cost when the bulk of the media doesn't like what you're saying. Last week, we learnt the spokeswoman for Doula UK was hounded out of her role because of a Facebook post in which she said only women can give birth. We live in strange times when stating an absolute truth results in you being labelled a bigot and losing your job. Birth coach Lindsay McCarthy-Calvert was found guilty of breaching Doula UK's equality and diversity guidelines and forced to delete the post, as well as being removed as spokeswoman. The controversy came as campaign to raise awareness of pap smears removed the word women for fear of offending the trans community, and instead advised everyone aged 25 to 64 with a cervix to be tested. Also in the UK, police have launched a hate crime investigation after a trans woman was refused a role in a pornographic film because she still has a penis. Rhea Cooper, who transitioned as a 15-year-old, believes that the refusal of the pornographer to have sex with her on film amounts to transphobic discrimination. Humberside Police has confirmed that a hate incident was logged and will be investigated. It's easy to believe that the UK is the epicentre of trans excesses, but the same phenomenon is present in the US, Canada and right here in Australia, where the Safe Schools program is compulsory in Victorian state schools, and you can identify as a different gender every year on your birth certificate in some states. So bravo to those who have the guts to speak out, knowing the backlash will be brutal, disproportionate and often disingenuous. As the saying goes, the opposite of bravery is not cowardice, but conformity. I opened the show mentioning Margaret Court's battle with Tennis Australia, who have today revealed that they will meet with the tennis legend this weekend, but the game's governing body plans to only recognise Court's achievements rather than celebrate them, as they did with Rod Laver's Jack. To me, this is just appalling. What her opinions are, whatever they are, does not detract from her greatness as a sporting legend. She is arguably the greatest female tennis player of all time, certainly one of our greatest female athletes in all sports, and yet her achievements are being downplayed because she has some un-PC opinions, because she's a devout, religiously inclined person who doesn't believe in gay marriage, amongst other things.
Yeah, what a strange way to view history and the historic achievements of some of our great athletes. It's also equally strange to me that we have to hold athletes who are, look, they're excellent in their own fields, but they're not necessarily philosophers, they're not necessarily legislators or policy writers. So what we're going to go across, and if we don't like the opinions of our athletes of old, we're going to ignore their contributions to the sport. It's completely intellectually dishonest, and it's borderline discriminatory, I would argue, as well, because the basis of her beliefs are from a religious understanding of the text. You may disagree with that. A lot of Christians do, but this is her belief, this is her understanding, and this is what she actually practices as a Christian. So there is an actual case that it's a discriminatory line to actually take.
Well, absolutely, Tina. We have sports people making all sorts of arguably divisive comments, but if they're from the left, there are no negative consequences. Pat Cash, for example, came out, I think it was just last year, and spoke out very strongly against Australia Day. Now, polls show that the overwhelming majority of Australians, even a bigger majority that support same-sex marriage, are in favour of Australia Day and in favour of it remaining on the current date. In fact, only 6% feel negatively towards it. So you could argue Pat Cash's comments were far more divisive and fringe than Margaret Court's, and yet, of course, there's no backlash and there shouldn't be against him. But if you state a conservative opinion, they come for you and they want to smash you.
This is disgraceful, Rita. If it was a woman from the left who had the achievement that Mrs. Court has, imagine there'd be celebrations every day of the week leading up to that actual date. So I'm disgusted on this. I mean, forget about whether you believe or agree with her beliefs or not. She's a strong warrior that doesn't vary from those beliefs, and good on her for standing up. You know, as I said, whether you agree with them or not, we should recognise the strength and power of this woman. I mean, people scream out all the time, women, 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 honour them, you know, recognise their achievements. I think this is disgraceful. We should hang our heads in shame over this, Rita.
Absolutely, and the feminists, Tina, have been very silent, both the male and female feminists, because you would argue this is a straight case of sexual discrimination. You've got two absolute legends of the sport, Rod Laver and Margaret Court, both celebrating their 50-year anniversaries of their Grand Slam year. Rod Laver's year was celebrated widely, and yet Margaret Court's is going to just be acknowledged, not celebrated. So that's nobody to this day has equalled her record. Serena Williams possibly will, but she still is the record holder for the most Grand Slam tournaments.
And I think Rod Laver has also previously expressed his disgust in the treatment of Margaret Court. I mean, it really is terrible, and we as Australians as a mass should do something about it. I'm sure the Prime Minister will back Mrs. Court all the way to have the recognition she rightly deserves.
Well, you would hope so, but I mean, Tennis Australia are showing absolute weakness here. They are just terrified of being accused of tolerating or even endorsing Margaret Court's views. So they are running scared, and it's quite pathetic, to be honest.